Hey y'all, this is Melissa Watson Ward with Shattering Ceilings. So excited to be here with y'all today as we interview another amazing woman in South Carolina politics. With me today, I have Francie Kleckley. Francie is running for Senate here in South Carolina, in District 10, which covers Marlboro, northeastern corner of South Carolina. She is a lifelong resident of South Carolina, where she did study at Clemson. Go Cox. Um, but then went to Francis Marion University. And so she retired as a career servant for the United States Department of Treasury, and again has her roots planted here, doing the work in South Carolina, has decided that she's going to run for state senate because, as you all know, we need more women in our state senate. So, Francie, can you tell us what made you decide to enter this race?
So I'll give you a little bit of background, Melissa. This Senate District 10 is all of Greenwood and portions of Saluda and Lexington County. It's a
Okay.
newly redistrict seat. And so, like you said, I finished college at Francis Marion and I got a good job and I'll just say it, the Internal Revenue Service,
Mm-hmm.
where it was a good federal job, but I was able to help individuals and small businesses get into compliance with their tax obligations. I then later served as our taxpayer advocate for South Carolina, where I helped individuals with on systemic issues nationwide impacting taxpayer rights and taxpayer burden, and tackled the identity theft, tax-related identity theft, and I
Mm-hmm.
retired as your executive over privacy for the nation for IRS. And so I saw kind of full circle how bureaucracy impacts everyday life.
What
And
type
so
of-
I retired. I happily retired living here in Lexington, and was watching the political landscape in South Carolina. And, what jumps out at me is we have too much influence by the extreme right. We have too few women and minority voices down there. And it seems like it's all about self-interest, and public gain. I don't believe that what's happening at our state house is about true representation of the people of South Carolina that really need it. And so, to quote our wonderful Barbara Jordan, retired Congresswoman, there is too much at stake for democracy to be a spectator sport. And I firmly believe that. And I think this is the year that we've got to come together to have some reasonableness in who we elect.
There is entirely too much at stake this year. I tend to not get nervous necessarily. I'm
Right.
like, the chips will fall where they fall. This country is strong enough to survive. But I am truly worried about what will happen this election, just because the extremists are gaining power and they have such an extreme agenda. And I'm really worried what that means for women. Senator Katrina Shealy, while I don't necessarily agree with all her politics, she was a giant in the Senate. She was a woman who advocated for women's issues, advocated for children's issues, and now that we're down to two women in the Senate, unless we're able to flip seats in November, I want y'all to understand that we will only have two women in the Senate unless we are able, Democrats can flip seats in November. Can you explain to our listeners, like, what does this mean? How will it impact South Carolina women to only have two, again, y'all, one, two women representing them?
Yeah, it's really a travesty, what happened to the sister senators who actually voted, in the best interest of women. So 54% of South Carolina are females. And so we don't have that kind of representation at the state house. And because we don't have that representation, our issues are often overlooked. I have been in leadership, for 30 years, and what I have seen is that women bring a more collaborative, consensus building, we are natural mediators because of our matriarch status in the family. And so I think we look for solutions that encompass the extremists pushing that agenda. Certainly, that is not about all families. That is about a very few specific elite families.
You are completely right. And the Republicans are liking right now to joke about DEI. And the reality is companies, it's been shown that companies that have more diversity in their teams and their leadership, particularly, again, having women and people of color at the table actually do better than companies that don't. So, if you're talking about trying to actually make the state do better, you need women at the helm. You need people of color at the helm. You need more diversity of thought, more diversity of
It's,
experience for us to actually do well.
it's the diversity of voices that get us to the robust debate, the consensus building, and here's where I'm willing to compromise, but here are the key things that are important to me. And that way we make our best legislation when we have diverse voices debating the issues. That's,
Exactly.
time and time again, it is
Mhm.
certainly the wrong side of history, a step away from good to do away with DEI, but well aware that so many companies are doing that.
Yeah, and they're probably going to suffer in their profits because again, we know the more diverse, like I said, the more diverse that their teams are, the better those companies do. So let's talk a little bit about your primary win. You won by 40 votes, and we know that there was low turnout in my home county of Richland. I think it was like 6%, a little over 6% turnout in the primary, which means that you have 6% of voters deciding essentially who their elected official is going to be because we are in a gerrymandered state. And so the primary many times decides who the person's going to be in November, after November elections. And so with those low turnout, unless we're flipping races, unless we're flipping seats, y'all. So again, we got to show up in November. But the primaries are important also. So with these low turnouts, can you talk about the importance of each vote in a race like yours? Because you are in a district that can be flipped. There definitely has the possibility for a Democrat to win, but that means that we need everybody to show up and vote. So can you,
Everybody's got to show up.
yeah, so can you talk
So,
about the
so I think
importance?
it's a couple of things. So the way the district has been gerrymandered,
Hmm.
it's almost like running three different campaigns
Oh,
because it
wow.
is three different counties with, again, very diverse voters in each of those three areas. Um, my opponent resides in Greenwood and has some deep roots in the county of Greenwood. And so he was able to turn out, a good number of votes. And I think he is our future, and I applaud him for running. But what it really tells us is that we can no longer, make excuses for not voting or believe that our vote doesn't count. It's the collective of the vote of like-minded people. And so I think part of the real crisis here is getting voters to the polls, giving them something, a reason to get to the polls. But if you look at the way, our state runs elections, in the Democratic primary, other than my race and the race that will run in the against Joe Wilson, there wasn't a compelling reason to go to the polls because the sheriff's race and all the other things are in the Republican primary. So I
Hmm.
think that's one of the challenges. So I'm hopeful in the general there will be enough issues that encourage people to get to the polls and realize how important it is for them to vote to bring about a different type of
Hmm.
leadership in our state.
And I just had this conversation with our fearless leader, Crystal Spain, of the importance of getting Democrats on the ballot. Because you're right that there are uncontested races, and y'all, the reality is, it's not like we have a spoil of riches where candidates are just falling out of the sky. We need people to step up and decide that they're going to run like Francie did. Because if not, Republicans are going unchecked, and we see what's happening with them going unchecked. And we've got to give Democratic voters some excitement. And part of that happens in the primary by us having candidates who are energetic and can energize voters. So we need people running. And as I said, and I'll say always, there's nobody coming to save us. Like, you are the answer to the problems of this state. And so you really need to step up, or think about stepping up and running for office. I'm saying that to all my listeners, especially my women listeners. Really look inside yourself and think about running for office. There are opportunities this year for school board, next year for municipal races, 2026. Again, we need you on the ballot. So Francie, what would you say to our listeners? What do you want them to know about you and your campaign overall?
So I am running, in part because of the way that our state, in my opinion, is rolling back our personal freedoms
Mhm.
and eroding the progress that we've made on human rights. And so I want, to bring Medicaid to the state where, we have turned away Medicaid expansion, leaving 325,000, South Carolinians, 82,000 of which are children, without health care. And so we've got to bring those resources that are being used in other states back to our states. We've also got to make sure that our women are able to get the reproductive care, and they will have a right to choose and have a safe and legal abortion. I also am very interested in bringing some difference to how we have our gun sense laws. My opponent, Billy Garrett, was all about banning abortions and having permitless carries. I think there has to be some different structure to the open carry. I appreciate guns and own plenty of those, but I think we have to do something different so that our communities will be safer. The other thing that I think is important, and I did say I have an IRS background, is the fiscal mismanagement of our state budget funds, private accountants to figure out, where the money came from and what it was intended for.
Mhm.
And so I am, I've done the work at the national level. I'm a proven, leader in the federal government. And so I am essentially running to bring some sanity and pragmatic leadership back to our state because I don't see that happening in our current situation.
Thank you, Francie. Y'all, as I always say, don't vote for women just because they're women. Vote for women because they're the better candidates. And as we see here, we have a good, strong candidate for Senate District 10, but she needs your vote. And women candidates this year, they need your donations. They need you to volunteer. They need your vote. So if we want to turn the tide of what's happening in Columbia, and what's happening nationwide, we've got to support women candidates on the ballot. And again, not just because they're women, but because they are the best candidates. So make sure you are bringing friends and family to the polls in November. Make sure that, even if it's a small donation, that you are financially supporting the candidate of your choice, that you are doing a shift of phone banking or canvassing. We need all hands on deck this election to get the right people in office.
That is a true statement, Melissa. And if I could add one thing, folks say, well, I don't think I live in District 10, but you may not. You may not be able to vote, but you know someone who lives in there. And so I think that is the power of social media as well, is when you see women candidates that you think should be supportive, follow their Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and all of that, and share it on your page with people who may know. It's about, connecting with other like-minded people and encouraging them to do the right thing in November.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Thank you for being a guest. Y'all, you know what to do. Make sure to subscribe to Shattering Ceilings, subscribe Subscribe to the Arena SC. We want to make sure that you don't miss any of the exciting interviews or articles that we're releasing about what's going on in politics here in our very beloved state of South Carolina. So if you want to be in tune and not miss the latest news, subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. Thank y'all.
Thank you so much for having me today on Shattering Ceilings. This is a great opportunity.
Thank you.